readers,
reviewers,
reenactors.
lend us your ears. Welcome to the Brothers Gwynne channel. Today we are very excited to be interviewing the one, the only Christian / Miles Cameron, the author of fantasy, sci-fi and historical fiction. I mean, could you write in any more genres? And we'll be talking about all those.
Hang on, I know Christian's going to say, I write spy novels.
Yeah, I've written 8 spy novels. A political thriller here and there. Yeah.
Of course, naturally.
Yeah, and this interview is brought in collaboration with The Broken Binding, a fantastic indie bookstore. We love it. They wrap the most amazing books, don't they?
They do.
It's like Christmas whenever those books arrive.
I love them too, and I signed a whole bunch of cards.
Yeah.
Go Broken Binding.
Yeah.
I'll
really
put a link in the description below to Christian Cameron's books, and many are signed. So do click that link and use the discount code TBGwynne7 for 10% off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But now
Oh,
I think
very nice. Do I get to use that code?
Of course, anyone can use it. We can reuse it ourselves. But now I think let's get into the first question, which is very important. No pressure.
No pressure, Christian. Okay, so number 1, elves or dwarves?
Elves.
Elves.
No hesitation there.
I love it.
No hesitation whatsoever. I'm a huge Tolkien nerd, and I really like. I mean, while I have no hesitation, I have to say that there are lots of parts of dwarvish culture I find amazing and really great. And I kind of love the sort of purity of the Norse / Finnish background to the dwarves. But I think from about age 5.5, have I said this before? My mom read me The Hobbit when I was a kid, and my mom was an actor. So she did all the voices and they were magical and it was fantastic.
Brought it to life.
And there we were in Mirkwood, and I was already sure I wanted to be an elf. So it just kind of rolled on from there.
That's brilliant. I mean, I remember watching the films when I was, I must have been 6 or 7, I think, before you were born, and watching Legolas just doing everything he did just made it everything looked so easy. So it was always very always wanted to be him. Absolutely. It's funny, we were talking to Peter McLean a couple of weeks ago and he said dwarves straight away, didn't he?
Yeah.
So we like getting the different answers there.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the truth is that most people have made up their minds.
Yeah.
It's either one or the other.
They're ready. Yeah, we haven't had anyone say no, we're not too sure actually.
Also, I have to add, while I'm not terrified to be underground, I don't know if you saw the pictures I put up this week on Instagram of the mines, the military mines under the walls of Rhodes.
Yeah.
But boy, you put me down there in the dark for any length of time, and I don't become a gibbering idiot, but I really don't like it. So I think I'd have made a terrible dwarf. I'd have been like, can we go above ground?
You need fresh air.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking of adding dwarves into your next fantasy series, then maybe there could be a dwarf that always wants to spend time up on the ground level.
That would be very interesting.
Well, anyway, I was about to get super nerdy and say I did once play a dwarven ranger, and that's not a legal character class, but that was the basis. He was basically a dwarven loser who could not handle underground spaces. And so the game master carefully twisted the campaign so that we had to do this huge underground thing. So that I basically wandered around role playing for a week because I couldn't actually do anything. Oh no! Good time.
That's a week well spent. Absolutely. So we know that it's been a very busy month for you. You've had not just 1 but 2 book releases. We will show them now, but we have first of all Artifact Space, a beautiful sci-fi. It's a soap. You said a soap opera in one of the videos.
Yeah.
It's not EastEnders. It's a sci-fi. It's a space opera. So, and then we also have Hawkwood Sword, a historical fiction set in the 14th century. So, how has your month been? Has it been a really busy one?
It's been incredible, and I changed my Twitter handle for a while to Christian Cameron is enjoying his 10 minutes of fame.
Yeah, I saw.
And that was, I mean, I've never done this many interviews. I think I've done 42 interviews in 35 days, something like that.
That's intense.
anyway, it's been wild. It's been a lot of work. Just the social media, like I know you guys understand this perfectly well, but in this day and age, authors do social media. It's one of the ways we stay in business. And that requires an almost constant effort and doesn't get any pages written. And then just for fun, because despite the fact that your dad teases me about my 4 or 5 books a year, I do occasionally run into real trouble writing. And so I had a real problem on Deep Black, which is the sequel to Artifact Space. And I sort of hit a wall. And then all of a sudden, one morning at about 6:40 in the morning, I figured out like how to get through the wall. And so then I had to do a bunch of work, because once you think of something like that, you have to write it out.
When you feel that inspiration.
So I did a ton of writing, which is all my long-winded way of saying, yes, thank you, Gwynne's. It has been a very busy month, and I am very glad to be at the cottage.
Yeah, I bet you are. So Christian's on vacation at the moment, a well-deserved one, I must say.
And there's no one else's interview that I would have taken at the cottage but you guys.
Thank you very much.
We are very honoured. We're putting you through more work when you're on vacation, so we are very honoured.
No, you guys aren't work. I view you as friends and sword students, not work.
And we view you as a friend also, Christian.
Absolutely.
Wait till Kareem's wedding.
That's going to be exciting. Absolutely.
It will.
Yeah, really good. Yeah, fingers crossed we can all make it to that. So amazing to
and I'm counting on you guys, because Kareem's busy, to keep me up to date on all of that. Anyway, we'll talk when we're not on camera.
Yeah.
So
the next question is, would you like to give a short pitch of Artifact Space to, I imagine most people who are watching this know of Artifact Space, but for those who don't?
So one of the interviews that I did was for an organization called Sci-Fi Saturday Night. And these are 2 older gentlemen, possibly older than me. And they were very funny. They really liked the book, but they had a shout line. And I told them it was so good, I was going to use it when I talked to you guys. So the shout line was, "Little Orphan Annie joins the Merchant Space Marines."
Perfect.
And there we go.
That does kind of sum up a great deal of the book. But it's a novel about somebody trying to find themselves and trying to learn about trust and love and family. So that's like part of it. But it's also a genocidal murder mystery dealing with 100,000-year-old murder, and that's part of it. It's an homage to a whole bunch of other both sci-fi and very mainstream literary novels like Little Women and Charles Dickens. And I don't know, I tried to slip in pretty much as many tiny mentions as I could, mostly for Will, because I know that Will reads the highbrow literature. And I was hoping that when he came across the Dorcas and some other things, he'd go like, Christian has read his Dickens. This is aiming to be highbrow literature.
Right. I loved all of your allusions. It brings it to life.
But
even more.
All of that also because I love space opera. I always have. Whether it's like Niven and Purnell's Mode in God's Eye, or just Star Trek itself, or like, I love the subgenre as much as I love epic fantasy, as a matter of fact. And I virtually worship Alistair Reynolds. I love Alistair Reynolds books. And I've always wanted to write one. And this one, sort of popped into my head. And I wanted, so behind all the apparent complexity is your sort of traditional space opera tale. And Sebastian de Castel said, it's Horatio Hornblower in space. Yeah, if Horatio Hornblower was a woman who was lying about her credentials to get on board in the first place, it might be like that. Do you guys know Horatio Hornblower? Do you know?
I've heard the name, thrown around there, and
I'm in the same.
But I'm not 100% caught up with everything.
See, when Sebastian de Castel and I were kids, there actually, I'll just throw this in. There weren't that many sci-fi and fantasy novels.
Yeah.
And we read a lot of like other British novels.
Yeah.
And Hornblower is like The Time of Nelson, and it's an adventure, and it starts with this 14-year-old kid and takes him all the way to the admiral transporting Bonaparte back to Elba when Bonaparte is finally defeated. It's like the whole history of the Royal Navy during the Napoleonic Wars seen through the eyes of one guy. Fabulous books.
That sounds good to me. I mean, definitely right up my street. Now,
So-
I think I saw Alistair Reynolds. Did he give you a review for Artifact Space?
He sure did. And you know, there are a bunch of people in this business, the business that we all sort of share, that I really admire. Your dad's one of them. Alistair Reynolds is one of them. And so getting praised by those people is like, makes my head swell and makes me very difficult to get along with. And I start to think that's super important. Yeah, anyway, that was fantastic.
It must have been. It must be amazing to have those people that you look up to, you know, praising your work.
Well, and people whose books I read, you know, and that's like, it's so weird becoming a writer or like a modestly famous writer, because I'm still actually just a reader. Like, you know, I read all the books. I met Alistair Reynolds by fanboying all over him at Galant's Fest, where I was like, I know you don't read fantasy, so you've never heard of me, and I don't care. I'm going to bore the crap out of you, telling you how much I love your books. And it turns out that Alistair Reynolds, like most of us, is fine with being told how much you love his books.
Yeah, I'm sure he is.
I haven't really met a lot of authors who are like, no, please don't tell me how much you love my book.
Yeah, no, there can't be that many out there. Definitely not.
No.
Now, sorry, I'll just want to ask something while it's in my head. Now, obviously, we know that you do a lot of research for your historical novels, and also for your fantasy, you bring a lot of historical elements into that. Now, how do you research sci-fi?
Well, I went into the future, but because I'm mostly a reenactor, I went way into the future and met a reenactment group who was reenacting Artifact Space. Now,
I told you that. Yeah, we knew that would be how it was. Yeah.
I don't think it's a big secret that a lot of Artifact Space is based on my own career in aircraft carrier aviation. And to circle around to Alistair Reynolds again, when I was busy fanboying on him, he finally went like, you flew airplanes off of aircraft carriers? And let me specify, I was not a pilot, I was a backseater. Yeah. But and he basically said right out, like, I'm fascinated by aircraft carriers. I've always thought that was the closest we come to real starships or something like that.
Yeah. Wow.
And he basically said right there at Galant's Fest, in I think 2016, you should write a science fiction novel based on that. And Jill Redfern leaned forward, my editor, and said, I'd buy that. As the sons of a well-known writer, you must be aware that when your editor says, I'd buy that, mostly we writers go, ding.
Yeah, you do it. You go and write that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was busy writing Cold Iron at the time, but I kind of filed that away and went like, if I ever get, because again, one of the things that you gradually learn as a writer is that there's a difference between an idea and a book. So like, I should write a science fiction novel based on aircraft carriers. That's an idea, but it lacks characters, plot, arcs, you know, like theme. It lacks all of that. And I've made this mistake. My dad warned me about it. You guys don't know this, but my dad was quite a well-known writer too. And I don't think but my dad taught me a ton. And one of the things he taught me was to never mistake an idea for a book. And yet both of us have committed that sin. And in fact, just 2 years ago, my dad called me up and said, I thought I had a book, but it turns out at page 80, I only had an idea. And that's like, that is a thing that can happen to you. So I just put that away until it became a whole book in my head.
Yeah. So you allowed it to grow quite naturally in your head.
Sorry, Will, I didn't hear you.
Oh, no, just saying that. So you allowed it to grow quite naturally over time with it kind of lingering in the back of your mind.
You know, I don't know if I've already told you this story, but it didn't grow quite naturally over time. It all came out. Have I already told you this story?
No.
Oh, so it's sort of, sorry, I'm trying to improve my Audible. I was sitting watching the movie Little Women with my wife, Sarah, and my daughter. And the whole book came to me in about 5 seconds in one scene.
I love that.
Did you guys see the movie Little Women?
It's amazing.
Yes, I love it.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the scene where Amy is in her art studio in France.
Yeah.
And I suddenly the boy's name has gone out of my head, but he says like, "Oh, you're such a great artist," and she says, "No, I'm not a great artist." And you know what that means? That means that now I get to have some rich guy's babies because that's the only life I get to have.
Yeah.
And somewhere in that speech, which I thought that actor delivered magnificently,
Yeah,
I went like,
Florence
"Ding! Well, what if Amy had other choices? What if Amy could be a spacecraft officer?" Like, I can't explain exactly how it happened, but in that, by the time that scene was over, I had most of Artifact Space in my head.
Wow.
I think there's a lot of authors out there that might dislike you now for that.
Well, you know, Ed, you say that, but since I've told this story, so I'm in a writers group. I'm going to make Will really jealous. We have a weekly telephone call with Evan Winter, Sebastian DeCastle, Nick Eames, Christy Sharish, a bunch of Canadian writers, none of us are always there. But you know, we talk, I think, very honestly about like what's good, what's bad, what didn't work. And since I told that story, it turns out most of those writers have had that experience.
Yeah.
And know like the difference between the book you write one word at a time and the book that just leaps into your head.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think it was Sebastian who said the problem is that the book that leaps into your head isn't necessarily better. Like sometimes the book you have to force out every word is the best book.
Yeah, sure.
And I'll tell you, there couldn't be more contrast between Artifact Space and Hawkwood's Sword, because Hawkwood's Sword was a mammoth research project where I had to know where real people were constantly. Like, I don't know if either of you have had time to read it because I know it's just out, but it hinges on a real murder mystery, right? Like the death of Prince/Duke Lionel, that's real. And there's people who say he wasn't murdered, and I went with the was murdered. Yeah. But then it's also a part of the 100 Years' War that the English as a people generally ignore, because it's right at the beginning of Sir John Chandos dies, all the great knights die of either old age or they're killed by the French, and then suddenly the French win all the battles for 20 years. And so Blanche Tac is like the last great Crécy Poitiers, you know, like Blanche Tac is like the last time that the English put it all together. They're outnumbered 8-1 and they win the big victory. Yeah. And I wanted William Gould to be at Blanche Tac since I started writing the series. And as it turned, but making that all work with time, with the death of Prince Lionel, and then I don't want to spoiler it too much, but like the whole murder mystery, that was like pulling teeth. And it was a very slow book to write. And I had to reread it mostly because I'm about to write Captain of Venice is like next in it. And I always read the last book again. Yeah. I mean, your dad may be a genius and he doesn't need to reread his past books, but I do, because otherwise I forget things. So, and when I was rereading it, I thought like, wow, this book was so hard to write, but actually it's not bad at all.
It's not bad at all. No, there's some amazing set pieces in it. I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but this one actually did make me tear up. So it was. We did a video recently, didn't we? We were talking about books that made us cry. So
and Hawkwood's Sword appearance.
It did bring a tear to my eye. And is that like the ultimate goal then when you're writing, to make someone cry?
You know Robin Carter, right? Yeah. Parmenion. Yeah. Robin Carter has accused me of this several times, and no, it is almost never my goal. I don't want to make but I do want to write the characters well enough that you feel real emotion. Yeah. And then on the other hand, like I don't write long, complicated death scenes ordinarily. Because the truth is that people who die by violence tend to you don't get to see the great knight give his dying speech with the lance in his gut, because usually he's just dead. Yeah. And I kind of believe in that. So I actually try and just write that way.
And taking out romanticism. Yeah.
If you know the Traitor Son series, like the bit of me that is grimdark is like, you may love this character, but willful murder, one of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
He just shed.
Yeah.
He just died of the plague. Sorry. And he didn't get a big scene. I mean, he does get to keep muttering from the afterlife for like 3 more
books. I love that.
But like that's a that's a thing, right? And so if I manage to get a tear from your eye, I guess that's good. That means you were invested in the characters.
Yeah, and you have brought a tear to many people's eyes. You were talking a bit about research, and with Artifact Space, I was quite astounded by the psychological depth you had to your characters. I mean, it was really amazing. I was wondering, is that something that just came quite naturally to you, or is it something you also researched as well?
So, first of all, that is an excellent question. Second of all, a very flattering question, which I really appreciate from you because I know you're the mainstream literature guy. So I'm going to tell you that I've gone through 3 phases as a writer, and this is a long-winded answer to your question, but I have no short answers. I actually have a T-shirt that says that in Latin. It says no short answers. But
I love that you'll have to explain what the Latin means if people don't speak Latin, and then I love that.
When I started writing, I made up characters, and I just made them up, and that sort of worked. But then I realized about 2 books into my writing life that I was sort of basing them on real people. Mm. And then in phase 2, I started kludging together people I knew to make characters. So it would be like so-and-so's bravery plus so-and-so's wit, or a guy, he's a Marine Corps 1-star general. I mean, he's retired now, who I worked with for a long time, and he has a couple of silver stars. And really, I saw him be incredibly heroic. And he became sort of my model for heroism. But then I tack on some flaws that, quite frankly, he didn't have. Yeah. But that as a writer, you kind of want to work with some flaws. Yeah. The problem with that is that the more reading and research I did, the more I realized that those things didn't necessarily go together. So like a little understanding of psychology. And I used to be a clandestine officer, and that is kind of like being a dark psychologist, right? You learn a lot about psychology, and you realize that actually the person who can do this very hard thing is probably not going to have this psychological problem. Like the more you read about that, you realize these things don't go together. Yeah. So phase 3, I just started using people as I knew them as characters, and they're real people, and I would use them in depth. And that was phase 3. And now I'm in phase 4. And phase 4 is like cold iron till now, where I'm back to making characters up, but I'm older and I know a lot more about how character works.
Yeah, sure.
So maybe that was too long-winded.
No, that was perfect.
So I'll tell you that a couple of the characters are actually based on people. Like Thea Drake is my daughter, Beatrice. And I just completely ripped off my daughter, Beatrice, right down to some of her sayings and her witticisms and her way of being snarky about everything, you know, even when being friendly.
Yeah.
Putting the needle in, all of that was basically stolen from my daughter. But Marka and Barrow is really out of my head. Like there's parts of her that are based on a fabulous officer I knew in the Navy, who was a female graduate of the American Naval Academy, and she had some hardship. And so, I grabbed some of that, but a lot of it, and I have definitely known some people who have had some terrible childhoods, and I borrowed some of that feeling. Anyway, thanks for the compliment. I'm in phase 4.
And it really just delivered perfectly. I think there might be some people watching who are aspiring writers, and often people like to have books that you go to for a certain technique or something that you really want to learn from it. I'd say that Artifact Space is really something if you want to improve on your characterization.
Yeah, definitely. And what I love is I recently read Killer of Men and of course Hawkwood Sword, and that's in first person as well. So do you prefer writing in first person or third person?
Okay, so again, because your dad is a great writer, I feel you more than any other interviewer will understand this. I was taught to write by my dad.
Yeah, sure.
And so my dad told me early and often that the hardest and best writing is first person. And he basically challenged me fairly early on to write a novel in first person. Yeah. And Killer of Men is that novel. And it is much harder. And the limited point of view makes you have to control plot a completely different way.
Yeah, sure.
And I have this problem, and it's a real problem. I grapple with it every book. I don't really believe in plot. Like video games have plots, but life doesn't have plot.
Yeah, sure. It's random.
Life is a series of pretty much unrelated incidents. And when I say we, I kind of mean epic fantasy writers. We sort of invent vast conspiracies to take over the world, to give a framework to the idea that there should be some organized progression to the way our character's life works. But can we all agree that this is actually a construct?
Yeah. I hope it doesn't happen anyway.
Yeah, it may have in rare cases.
Yeah.
So on the flip side, I'm actually very impatient with unstructured novels. I know it's a popular thing. I know that it's a very hard thing. And maybe someday I'll write one. But when I read, even though I would like it to be good and I'd like it to be clever, I am also reading for entertainment. And it drives me insane when I spend more time trying to figure out what's going on than enjoying the author's cleverness or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
So that's all by way of saying I'm shy of resting everything on plot arcs.
Yeah.
And so the thing that's appealing about first person, I'll finally get back to the point, is that it allows you to present that almost randomness that real life offers. And then you can be pretty clever, and the plot is hitting the character with a lot of other data. It's like red herrings in a mystery novel, right? Sure. But the plot is just part of the fog of information you provide. And the reader does not immediately say, oh, of course this was going to happen. Oh, of course he's going to be made a slave. Nope, bet you did not see that coming.
No way, no.
Oh, but it turns out the family he's a slave with are actually probably nicer people than his own family. Bet you didn't see that coming.
No way, yeah, exactly.
And so, like, yes, I had plot arcs drawn out, but first person allows me to disguise them a little more. And that's fun.
Yeah. It's very interesting that even though plot is important, and yes, we do breed for entertainment, don't we? And that can come in a variety of forms. I thought it's very interesting that you do prioritize character and also bringing in that real life authenticity. Do you set out with that, or does it just happen kind of subconsciously?
Are you aware of, I'm going to be real pedantic here. Are you aware of Aristotle's sort of hierarchy of how to write drama?
So I've not actually read too much into it, so no.
So paraphrase, Aristotle says, character creates motivation, motivation creates plot. And my dad made me learn to write that way. So you know the plot, but you constantly have to make sure that the character's motivations lead to the plot, not the other way around.
Yeah.
So to me, the very worst thing to come across in a book is when you say, she would never have done that.
Yeah.
That wouldn't happen. Like, and that, or where you go like, no, that plot left turn was not in any way driven by any character. And going back to your earlier question about first person, what's very complicated about first person is that when I wrote Traitor's Son, when your dad writes Shadow of the Gods, we have the liberty to show what the bad guys are doing, or to show the other side of the coin. I won't say bad guys, that's not fair, but to show multiple points of view on the action, on the political action. And that is liberating and saves a lot of words. When you're just dealing with a single point of view, especially when you're experiencing the single point of view, I don't mean to pound this. I don't mean to be patronizing. You know what I'm saying? Like there's just one point of view, and it's like, did the reader catch that going by? Because that little clue might not have been heavy-handed enough. Whereas if the Persian general said like, now we're going to invade Greece, but that's not how it's going to feel to your lone slave living in Ephesus. He doesn't get to hear the general say that. So anyway, it's a different way of putting it all together.
And it's making the reader endure what the character's going through. So you know, every step of Aranessus's journey, you felt like you're there with him, living the pains, living the highs and the joys as well, which is something I enjoy about first person.
So it's funny. I think you are the greatest pair of interviewers that I interview with, because each of you has a different slant. So I've addressed Will, I'll address Ed. It's a reenactment. It took me years to realize this, and it was actually one of my friends who said, your books are reenactments because they are deliberate immersions, right? Like, we're not just going to fight some battles. Let's eat some bread. Let's start a fire. Let's and first person is the most immersive because in effect it's you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to switch back to Will and say, Will, you enjoyed Wolf Hall.
Yeah.
And wasn't that very immersive?
Oh, incredibly so. That's where it got a lot of its strengths from.
Yeah. And like, to me, that's a thing. It's like, if I can take you to a reenactment of ancient Greece, I've done my job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. I love that. Brilliant.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting hearing about how you write and also your process as well. So my next question is, what is a typical working day for you when you're not on a lovely vacation?
So I'm about to tell you what's typical, but it hasn't been typical for the last 2 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it will be typical again in
one day.
After October. I'm taking a bit of a break.
And I blame these as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. No. My writing day I usually starts at 8:30 in the morning. Before COVID, I went to my favorite coffee shop. During COVID, I just sat down at my table and I write till about 2:00. I start by going over 20 or 30 pages of basically yesterday's work, because I tend to write 15, 20 pages a day. But sometimes I go over 2 days' work. And that is how I feel about it. Like, if I am worried that yesterday was weak, I'll start earlier and see if I can just strengthen it as I go. And if I went on vacation for a week or went camping or went to a reenactment, which can really break the process, then I'll go back 100 pages and I'll work and I'll sort of revise, do a little light editing through 100 pages and then launch off again, because I'm back in the headspace with the characters. And so it usually takes me, leaving aside the 100-page revision, usually takes me an hour to do my light edit on yesterday's work. And then the next 4 hours are just writing.
Yeah. So you've immersed yourself and then you get into writing of that day.
Yeah. And the truth that may confuse some other writers is that the pastry, which I know is very important because I'm always consuming pastries, the pastries are consumed during the revision part, not during the writing part. Because once I start writing, I don't even, if my coffee is still sitting there, I just ignore it. I just write.
You have to be hydrated and full when you get into that.
And I write until I'm done. And once in a while, I have an amazing day and I don't stop at 2:00. And more, this actually started, I think, on cold iron. If Sarah, my wife, is still working when I get home, I'll just have another little work day. Yeah. You know, like if let's say I'm cooking dinner and I'll start dinner at 6. If I have time, I'll slip in 2 more hours, especially if I'm really in the scene and I'm enjoying what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Sure. Is that a good answer to your question?
Yeah, excellent. I mean, I imagine you sitting in the nice pastry shop and it's, a really busy environment, really loud, and, lots of cups clattering. Do you listen to music, or do you just, can you kind of block that out, or do you take it all in and listen to people? And
all of those things. A number of times I have been gifted with great conversational tidbits picked up while sitting at a table in a coffee shop. On a couple of occasions, they've gone straight into the book. Like I just stolen from,
just pillaged.
There are few things more characterful and hilarious than listening to a young man attempt to chat up a girl who isn't interested. And you listen to that and go like, son, you're doomed.
But let me steal that.
I'm going to capture this moment of extreme.
I'm going to immortalize your embarrassment.
Exactly. And I've done that a couple of times, but I do listen to music. And unlike Nick, who listens to rock and roll, I mostly listen to medieval and early Renaissance music.
Excellent. So no Led Zeppelin. No Led Zeppelin.
What's that?
No Led Zeppelin.
Sometimes in a different mood, I'll listen to Jethro Tull. I love Jethro Tull.
Yeah.
But when I want to listen to rock, it's kind of like English folk rock of the 70s. It's not mainstream.
Yeah, sure. Excellent. Yeah, I always imagine the music that you listen to is, very, very period and very immersive, like you said earlier. So
I do like Lana Del Mar. Who my daughter introduced me to, and I definitely have some Def Leppard albums on my. I mean, it's not all highbrow, but when I'm writing, there's a particular couple of composers whose work just seems to knock out the universe and just let me move forward.
Excellent. Right, so we if we do a few kind of quick fire questions, then we'll get through as many as we can, because we have quite a few from YouTube as well, and from Twitter as well. But first of all, do you have a favorite time period that you haven't written about yet?
That I haven't written about? Well, yes. So my favorite time period that I haven't written about yet is complicated and it's hard to pin down.
Okay.
It's the 8th, 9th century, but it's probably not the 8th, 9th century that you as a Norse reenactor would like.
Yeah, okay.
Because the Byzantine, Carolingian France, Anglo-Saxon England world, and not necessarily the world of violence and arms and armor, but the restoration of ideas of Rome and all that, all the stuff that's going on that we call the Dark Ages, but it's not really very dark.
Yeah.
And I would include Damascus and Cairo. It's actually a very exciting world. I also have Norse kit or whatever. We all sort of focus on the Norse, the Anglo-Saxons, but there's a lot going on in that world. And eventually I will write a novel about it. I've thought of one about a young Englishman going on pilgrimage to Jerusalem.
Brilliant.
It's not going to be a lot of sword fights. It's really going to be a lot of encounters with discovering that almost everybody else has a bigger civilization than he does.
No, that's one thing I loved about reading Robert Lowe's Oathsworn series. It's seeing those different cultures that you don't see with, Bernard Cornwell when you're with Alfred the Great, that kind of stuff. You see the different cultures of, Constantinople, and it's amazing, and it really was an eye opener for me, 100%.
I have to say that one of the many moving, fantastic historical moments I've had was being in Hagia Sophia in Istanbul and looking at the scratched in runic signatures of all the Varangian guardsmen, including a bunch of Englishmen. And you go don't tell me people didn't travel. Oh yeah, back then people didn't travel. Yeah. Here's Olaf, what's his name, and Harald Hardrada and Eric somebody or other, scratching with their daggers.
Hakon was it. That's it. I love that.
In Piraeus, they have a monument that a bunch of Varangians inscribed in Greek.
Yeah.
And that suggests that, the guys who spent 10 years there maxing out on their pay, of course they learned to speak Greek. Yeah. And the Saint, I think it's St. Olaf's Church in Constantinople was an English church where the priest was English and people used English as the language, because even the Varangian guardsmen who married Greeks and settled down taught their kids to speak English. And I think that's, I don't know, somewhere in there's a novel.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. And it's things that people don't really think of when you, like you said earlier, when you think of Norse, you think of all the long ships and the axes, don't you? You don't think of them traveling down, learning different languages and wearing the kaftans and all the different clothes of other cultures. So,
or just standing there looking at the Parthenon and going Olaf, check that out.
that should be the first line of your.
I think that's one of the awesome things about history and historical fiction is the wealth of opportunities you have that people wouldn't even think of. So maybe that'll be a future project we're looking forward to seeing. And speaking to that,
Go ahead.
After finishing and publishing Artifact Space and Hawkwood Sword, what projects are you currently working on?
10th anniversary of the Red Knight, with like 6,000, 8,000 new words. So I'm not saying that everybody needs to run out and buy a new copy, but there is new solid amounts of new material in there, and some scenes that I think people will want to see. So 10th anniversary of Red Knight, and then I'm doing the edit of Against All Gods, which is my next epic fantasy, because really Artifact Space is a departure. I am an epic fantasy writer. That is first and foremost what I do. And Against All Gods is Bronze Age fantasy. So it's not Greek, although there's sort of Mycenaean Greeks-ish in it. Okay. It's sort of everybody, and everybody includes Peruvian pre-contact, sort of pre-Inca, and sort of Egyptians, and sort of Sumerians, and sort of Hittites, and sort of some stuff I made up, and giant dragons and mythologies I've cheerfully ripped off from, Bronze Age mythology is as epic as Norse mythology. Giant monsters, things that fly. And I had a lot of fun with it. In addition to talking about some real world stuff like environmental collapse. And I'll give you a quick précis. The shout line originally was 4,000 years ago, good fought evil for possession of the world. Evil won. And so there are these gods, and they're all horrible. Yeah. This is horrible. Like, there is no god of love. There's a goddess of lust. There's no, there's not really a god of thievery, because honesty isn't prized enough to have thieving have a god. And everything's about power and like establishing power. And there may be some nasty shots at capitalism included in this.
I'm excited to read some of those.
And the gods have a problem too, in that they're actually just jumped up mortals. They're like 50th level D&D characters. They're aging out and becoming senile and crazy. And so the sort of all-father of the gods, who hasn't lost it, has two problems. He's facing a revolt from mortals, but also his own gods are almost as annoying as, and so he's almost a comic character, but not really comic. It's just that instead of being the big bad guy, he has problems of his own. And it's called Against All Gods because it's a group of people who have just had enough. And in various ways, they've established, I guess, trust is my theme for the day. They've established, one of them is a warrior, and he comes from a warrior culture that has begun to discover something that we might almost call chivalry, or at least a sort of warrior agreement. And they're all bull leapers who are super fit, and it allows me to design a martial art based on like extreme gymnastics, with parkouring in all directions, and that was super fun. But there's a woman who's a bear dancer, and she's just had it with being mistreated, and an entire group of people who are pacifists, and the way in which they've avoided getting involved by avoiding violence. And I feel like not a lot of people have tried this in epic fantasy. Characters who are like avoiding violence. So we sort of have like the extreme warrior, the extreme magic user, and then the non-violent people who were trying to avoid getting involved, except they've been pulled in, and a race of giant intelligent moths.
What a
pitch!
Mix.
Wow, yeah, that is amazing.
I'm sure that we would love to have another interview when Against All Gods
would be out as well. That'd be really good fun. Yeah, and we're looking forward to your return to fantasy. Of course, we recently read Bright Steel, didn't we? So that was fantastic. So fantasy.
I'd like to thank you guys for doing that. I have to say, for whatever reason, that the Cold Iron Master and Mages series, it came out. didn't get a lot of airplay from anybody. And only now are people sort of discovering it. And I'll tell you, one of the most delightful parts of looking at my sales figures on Artifact Space on Amazon, which I do. I know that authors aren't supposed to do this, but I try not to check more than twice a day, is watching people buy cold iron. Like, oh, finally, people realize cold iron exists. Thank you. Anyway.
Oh yeah, I think before I read Tom Swan, Arantha was kind of, you know, the guy I wanted to be. Arantha. So and Tom Swan just kind of pitched the post now, but yeah, Arantha, I love Arantha, and you know his relationship with the sword and everything. Yeah. So Cold Iron definitely needs to be picked up more. And I love how different it is to you know, normal fantasy novel. It's very spy-esque, isn't it? So
and he's another one of those characters that just feels real.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to answer a question from Twitter. Somebody said, which of your characters is most like you? Tom Swan is me. I mean, I may not be quite as daring or stupid as Tom Swan, but that is largely based on me. Whereas Gabriel Murians is both way better and way dumber than me. You know, Aram Nestos is actually my Uncle Donald and is almost entirely the family war hero is entirely based on him, or not entirely, but largely. Yeah. And it isn't me at all. I a bit of a psychopath, eh? You know, like he can just do it. He just kills people and
he's
kind
a little bit scary. Yeah.
So and so he had to die, so I did that. And my Uncle Donald was like that, but I am not. I have none of that. So Tom Swan, definitely Tom Swan. You know, like do the ridiculously dangerous thing and then throw up later. That is totally
yeah, exactly. And then go and see a tailor to make some nice velvet clothes. So yeah,
exactly. And see, Ed, the reason we're friends is that you know that it's as important to have the shopping scene in Venice as it is to have the fight scene. And this is, I don't know, I hate to repeat myself, but one of my favorite novels as a kid was The Three Musketeers.
Yeah, sure.
And The Three Musketeers is full of shopping scenes. They buy horses, they buy swords, they buy pistols. It's like, yes, I want to be in 17th century Paris. Yes, I want to go buy a rapier. Yes, that sounds like great fun.
And I'm actually starting to expect seeing these scenes in novels that I read. And when they're not in there, I kind of feel a little bit disappointed.
I mean, in a lot of books, they just skim over, say, oh, I bought this equipment.
They bought some brown trousers and a brown cloak and, you know, all this kind of stuff. No, we need the detail. We need the materials.
When you've tasted how good it is, when you have the full explanation and the full scene, you need it all the time.
What I've noticed as well in your novels is that you always have a dance scene, don't you? In I think nearly everyone I've read must have a dance in there somewhere.
So I don't need to tell the Gwynnes this, but I will tell your viewers, like you can get a lot of character into a fight scene. And in good writing, in good epic fantasy writing, it's not just to show a fight. A fight scene should show character and move plot and maybe even either describe or lead to motivation, right? You'd like to do all those things in a fight scene. The interesting thing about dance is that you can do all the same things you do in a fight scene, but without killing anyone. And both genders can be fully represented.
Yeah.
And dance exists in like every culture. Dance can be a way of training warriors. Dance can be a way of showing that a woman is more than just a pretty face. Like if you've watched a really fit woman dance, you're watching a level of athleticism that you can't represent just by standing like a wallflower. Oh, she's so pretty. And I really enjoy using dance that way. Also, I also do dance. And I think that it's a great venue. I actually think it's an undervalued venue.
Yeah.
Even like circle dances. I'm kind of thinking of like the Norse world. Even simple circle dances, they're not hard to learn, but they're still full of character.
Yeah.
You watch a bunch of people doing a simple like English village dance and go like, you watch them and go like, that one's really enjoying it. That one's not enjoying it. That one's there because his dad is making him, you know, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Another form of expression.
And you read the dance scenes in Tom Swan and they're like another kind of fight for him, which I love. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like the other thing is, with Tom Swan at least, and I think Arantha does this once, you can also be a clown when you dance and make people laugh.
Yeah.
And that is its own whole thing, right? I mean, it's something. I am not just here to praise your dad, but injecting humor to me is key to good writing, and your dad does it. Not all writers do. And I think that making your characters clown or making them bad at dancing are two legit ways of approaching it.
Yeah. And lots of people can relate to that because, like you say, not as many people do dancing. I know that I'm not very confident in my dancing abilities unless maybe I've had a cider or two. But yeah, so it's definitely there. It's a good one. I like that one.
And I think actually talking about John Gwynne, Papa Gwynne himself, I think we can read a few more of the Twitter questions. And one of them was from Papa Gwynne. How does Christian write around 4 books, in brackets, of outstanding quality every single year? Asking for a friend.
Yeah, I saw that go by and I chose not to answer it so I could answer it today. I'm glad your father thinks they're of outstanding quality and I will treasure that forever. But I don't know. Honestly, I don't. Like, so Deep Dark Secret of the Universe, I write what I want to read. And my first audience is me. So yeah. I don't write what I think. I may occasionally write what I think Ed wants to read, but I don't write for an audience. I was just saying to my editor the other day, but I want to know how this story ends. Like, I need to finish this before I move to another project because I want to know how the story ends.
Yeah.
And I think it's that storytelling thing that keeps my nose to the grindstone because I want to see how it all comes out.
Yeah.
And then my dad taught me that it's a job. It's a job. And, I guess I'm infected with the work ethic thing. I like to do the job every day. So basically 5 days a week, I sit down and do it. And it's dangerous to allow myself too much time off.
Yeah, sure.
Totally okay to go on trek or go to the cottage. Those are like disciplined vacations. But a couple of times when I've just allowed myself like, oh, I don't really need to work today. Well, all of a sudden, 5 weeks have gone by. And it's like, well, I got a lot of fishing done. And I've learned that lesson. Another example is I don't play any online games. Because computer games to me are just the death of writing. Like, I just won't get it done.
That's the same. Yeah.
If I allowed myself to play Eve online, which looks really good to me, or it used to like 10 years ago, I'm not sure I'd ever write another book.
Do you know, it's addictive. It's been what I love. Well, we played this thing called Total War. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but
yeah. And
there's so many different ones out there. And I read Killer of Men, so I was like, okay, I'm going to go be Athens on Total War, and I'm going to conquer the world. And there. That was what 50 hours
struggle,
and then I thought I've been Athens, I might as well be Sparta, see the other side of the coin, and then you're Macedon, and it's just a whole slippery slope. So yeah, I can relate to that.
Which reminds me, Ed, I need to take you to task because in your last episode you described Aramnestos as Aramnestos of Athens.
Yeah, I know.
Aramnestos of Plataea, a much smaller city, but it would be as if you were from Birmingham and someone described you as being from London.
And you could be hurt for that mistake. Yeah, I did correct myself in the last video.
You said it
yet, so
yeah,
I do apologize for that. It was a slap wrist.
Different sports teams and everything.
Absolutely. But yeah, so video games, we'll cut those out. No. Be a good writer.
Yeah. So it's about discipline, but also it seems like you love it as well.
I kind of feel like that when you take a little bit of time off writing, though, the things that you do are kind of their experiences. They're not kind of, going out for a day just for a little walk around somewhere. It's going to see a castle.
It's always productive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And as you guys know, sorry, the lawnmower just went by, so I hope I'm talking on the right subject.
Yeah, perfect.
When I'm in writing mode, everything has to do with that, right? So if I go on vacation, my vacation has to do with it. And when we went to the Lake District, I was looking at things that were going to go into Tom Swan and things that were going to go into the last William Gold novel. When we go to Greece, I'm, I might be researching 3 books at the same time but it's what I have joked to your dad is the lifestyle technique, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I've also learned, and this is probably too much information, that I write too fast for my editors. They really only want one book a year. So
yeah.
I will probably be slowing down.
No.
What do I do with the rest of my time? I love to write. Like,
yeah.
Do I just write stories for me and then just put them
just
away?
Hold them back. Just
yeah.
I've got another one when you're ready to stagger them. Yeah.
when I'm bored, I sit down and start writing. When I'm happy, I start writing. When I'm sad, I start writing. I don't know. It's like an affliction, except so far it pays the bills.
I think that sounds like the key to writing, really, isn't it? That you sound like you do love it, and like you say, you do it whatever mood you're in, so it does feel like a job, but also everything you do kind of is fueled into that. So that must feel
when I'm
really
talking
good.
to younger writers, I always say the number one thing you need is passion.
Yeah.
And probably the number two thing you need is life experience, which is a terrible thing to tell a young person. But all that character that Will likes comes from 58 years of observing other people.
Yeah.
But the passion is the part that gets you through 130,000 words.
Yeah.
Like I can tell on every page of Shadow of the Gods how motivated your dad is by the Norse world, by the details of his reenacting life, like by all of that. I can see the whole package, and I can see how that passion carries through the plot, carries through the characters.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I keep praising your dad is I think we have a lot of things in common, and that is definitely me. Like if I fall in love with a time period, like the first thing I do is read 40 books about it. And the second thing I do is like buy some kit, maybe a sword, swing the sword. And then what I now plan to do is at the crest of that wave, I write a book.
Yeah.
I want to like get my surfboard up on the crest and just ride it all the way into the beach.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And now another Twitter question. I think it is really interesting that that idea of passion is at the center of everything. And as you said, you write books primarily for yourself, what you would enjoy. And obviously, I think that's a big part. You can't be writing something for that you're not going to enjoy, because how can you put your heart and soul into that? Especially when it's your full-time job.
Yeah, 100%.
But now on to some more Twitter questions. So we had one from Alex Robbins, and he asked, what is your favorite weapon and piece of armor?
So
you had to pick one.
Yeah, I think if I had to pick one weapon, I'll surprise you and pick the longsword and not the Giavarina. I love Giavarinas, but I've said that on other interviews, and I'll just go for the longsword.
Yeah.
It's such a great ubiquitous weapon. And in fact, one of the reasons I put it in artifact space is that if you built a longsword out of space age materials, you would also have a fabulous crowbar that you could use like in a rescue op to get somebody out of a cockpit. Or I can think of zillions of ways to use it on a spacecraft.
Yeah.
In addition to in a boarding fight. And in fact, I haven't said this, but I envision them as having like toolkits in the handles, and like it's sort of like a giant survival knife, not just a longsword. But yeah, I'm going to go with the longsword. Whether Italian or German, to me, they're about the same. Going to go with the longsword.
Good choice. And what about armor then?
You want a piece of armor?
Yeah.
I feel like this is a cruel question.
That's a tough one, because once you own a suit of armor, you realize it's all meant to go together.
Yeah.
It really don't want anything by itself. But I will go outside the box and say sabatons.
Okay.
So I love sabatons because they're so articulated to allow you to walk. And I fight in my sabatons most of the time on foot. And I'll tell you that even though people always say, oh, these are only for fighting on horseback. If they were only for fighting on horseback, they wouldn't be articulated so you can walk or run.
Yeah, sure.
I think they were actually meant to be worn on foot.
Yeah.
And I wear my very pointy sabatons in deep grass, and I have never once fallen down. Now, that will eventually happen. But like, I have long spikes on the front.
Yeah.
Anna Smith Spark once said that they were spikier than her spiky goth shoes.
Yeah, she wears some amazing shoes.
She really does.
But like, yeah, I think they're fascinating. I think the care the armorer has to put in is like a taste of the whole suit of armor. So Sabatons today.
But yeah,
tomorrow it'll be something different.
And I love that I didn't expect Sabatons at all. So very nice.
So much to choose from. And now Sarah Reed said, so who were your main writing influences and who are you most currently excited about within the literary world?
Sorry, I've got the lawnmower in the background and you have to tell me again.
No worries at all. Who were your main writing influences and who are you most currently excited about within the literary world?
Okay, so that's a fabulous question, but it might take me 58 years to answer it. So I'm going to say, I think my primary literary influences as a young person were a Scottish writer named Dorothy Dunnett. And if you haven't read King Hereafter, it is like the most literary Viking novel you'll ever read. She was a brilliant, brilliant woman. Yeah. A little bit dated now because she believes that she can give you 475 pages of world building, one fight scene in the bookends. But I was very influenced by Dorothy Dunnett, Alexander Dumas. Like Three Musketeers was like my first serious book, and I've never let go of that. Patrick O'Brian. I don't know if you know Patrick O'Brian.
I've heard the name.
I don't.
Jane Austen for boys. I have heard him described as a matter of fact. I think that the New York Times described him as Jane Austen for boys.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
A brilliant character writer and the only action writer I've ever encountered who writes a whole book to build you up to a battle scene and then passes over the battle scene in 2 sentences because it's all about the characters.
Yeah.
And you can just take for granted the characters can win the battle.
Yeah.
So you don't get about like.
Yeah.
When I first read it, I was deeply disappointed. But now that when I go back over it, I think it's a brilliant piece of writing.
That sounds like Shogun, James Clavell. Yeah.
And then like Tolkien and like, where do I stop?
Yeah. I think Tolkien does something quite similar, doesn't he? That he doesn't linger on the battles. They're epic in scale, but it is all about the character, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is. And then C.J. Sherry. Do you guys know C.J. Sherry?
No, I do not.
So she was a huge fantasy and sci-fi writer in the 70s and 80s. She's still out there. She won the Hugo Award, I think, 3 years in a row.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
And I would argue that The Tree of Swords and Jewels, that may be the second book. She wrote 2 fantasy novels, basically about the last elf living in a fantasy Anglo-Saxon England that are amongst the best fantasy novels I've ever read. Yeah. Everything all included. And like her detail is fabulous. Her characters are amazing. It's all great. And then she wrote fabulous science fiction novels that, really great space opera, really thoughtful. Early feminism, which to me as a teenage boy, I had not come like, oh, you mean women should be equal to men? Oh, wow, where'd that come from? I went to an all-boys school. Like no one had ever mentioned this as a concept.
Yeah, sure.
And those were my big influences as a young writer. And then, as I went on, I read everything.
Yeah.
I am an omnivore so I read mystery novels like Dorothy Sayers. I love Dorothy Sayers.
Okay. Yeah.
And I read mainstream novels. When I started dating my wife, she was much more literary than I was. And I started reading all these so-called good novels that were mostly very good. And that like upped my bar. So do you remember A.S. Byatt? You know the Angels and Insects?
No.
I'm really looking at Will when I say this because I think Will would be more of an Angels and Insects reader. But
yeah, sure.
And then most recently and most incredibly impressively, I would say Ferrante and her Neapolitan Quartet, which may be the best novels I've ever read in my life. And there's not a sword fight. There's not a sword fight to be seen. It's all character. In fact, there really isn't even a plot. It's basically 2 women locked in a lifelong love it's not love-hate. It's like friendship with all the complexities that real friendship comes with.
Yeah, sure.
And both of them are exceptional and brilliant, but both of them are also highly flawed. And I've never read anything like it. I just like got to the end and went, perfect. And also, I'm a terrible writer. I will never write anything this good.
I mean, that's what we think when we read. When I finish Artifact Space, I mean, we would both love to be writers, wouldn't we? And I was just thinking, I will never write characters like these.
And they're always our favorite books as well. So.
Yeah.
Listen, I have friends.
Oh, hello.
I by no means wish by praising Ferrante to down John Gwynne or Alistair Reynolds, who I think are the writers who inspire me right now in my own business. But one of the kicks I'm on since I've gotten my 15 minutes of fame and I get to have a bunch of interviews is to tell everybody to get outside their comfort zone.
Yeah.
Read some feminist fiction, read some gay fiction, read some mainstream literary fiction, or read some Black fiction.
Yeah.
There's great stuff out there. And all of us, and I mean me, I'm not like talking to you guys because I think you do this, but I can pigeonhole and go like, oh, give me another Viking-based epic fantasy. And then I have to sort of hit myself in the head, or my wife does it. She hands me a book and says, I don't care what you're reading right now. Read this. And she's never wrong. But I want everybody to just get out of their comfort zone sometimes and go like, I'm going to read this book I would never read.
Yeah.
And if you've never read any Margaret Atwood, Margaret Atwood, Handmaid's Tale is the sort of obvious entry. But there's so much good stuff out there right now in so many different genres. And sure, my heart belongs to epic fantasy, but at least 3 times a year, this is what I'm trying to push on everybody. 3 times a year, no matter what your main genre is, you should like pull the plug and turn to some complete stranger and go, okay, tell me what's the best piece of Black futuristic sci-fi out there I'm going to read way outside my genre norm.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that's really fun. And I also think it helps you grow as a writer.
Yeah.
Are you guys planning to be writers?
Planning, hopefully one day. I try my best. Well,
we both wrote quite a few short stories, don't we? And just
because
when I started writing, Christian, it was, I'm sure it's how lots of writers start. They read a book and they try and copy it. So obviously I read the
that was me,
and then I tried to copy it.
And I read Dorothy Dunnett's King Hereafter and I tried to copy it.
Yeah, okay.
And it was terrible. And we won't even talk about my Elves in Space novel. We won't even
hang on a minute.
But yeah, like it's reading outside your genre preference where often I feel you learn to be better.
Yeah, sure.
Because I won't name names, it's dangerous, but there's people out there who are so good at what they do and they do it completely differently from me. And I may never write that way, but seeing it may give me an idea like, oh, that's how I can bring out that character.
Yeah.
That's how. And genres tend to get closed in on themselves and kind of go like, this is what dragons are like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Done. This is what a fight scene should go like. And so sometimes you need to jump the shark and go over there and go, oh, they didn't even show the fight scene in that romance novel. They just blurred through it like it wasn't even there.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I think you're completely right. I think, well, how will you know if you'll like the genre if you never try it?
Yeah.
Bloody comfort zone. Yeah. I completely agree.
That's good. I mean, what we like is obviously we can choose another book for each other, can't we?
Yeah.
And then I say, okay, there's something I really love, Will. I don't know if you will, but give it a go and try it. So we try and do that with each other, don't we? So that'd be good.
Have you guys read Jeanette Ng's Pendulum Sun?
No, we have it, but we haven't
read it yet.
I'd be interested to hear what you think. I adored it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was way outside my comfort zone. There's like no sword fights. How can you even write a fantasy novel?
Yeah.
But I thought it was one of the best books I read that year.
It's like we had that kind of experience with E.J. Beaton's The Counselor.
Yeah.
There's 2 action scenes and the rest is
I bought it because of you guys.
Oh, excellent. Very
Yeah.
good. Yeah, it's well worth a read. And the politicking in there is excellent.
Yeah.
The character work as well. And like William said, there's 2 fights and they don't feel like they're what EJ Beatson's getting at.
No.
Are they? You know, it's really the character work at the forefront, which is like you say, getting out of your comfort zone.
Exactly.
And experimenting, experiencing everything.
Yeah.
Good.
And another question from Sarah reads, so where do you think is the best place to start with your backlist for someone who is interested in reading some of your works for the first time?
Yeah, this is not an uncommon question this month. And I'm going to give a weird answer. My weird answer is Artifact Space, because it's not connected to anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think it is absolutely, no, I've lost the word I wanted. It's the typical piece of my writing style.
Sure.
Right? You guys aren't me. Am I not right? It's like plot through detail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I believe that's my trick. Plot through detail.
Yeah.
It's plot through detail. It has strong characters. And I know that there are people who do not like the way I deal with plot, and good for them. That's fine. So if you don't like Artifact Space, you won't like The Red Knight, and you won't like Killer of Men.
Yeah.
And I used to say Killer of Men, but what I've learned with the English, especially, is that not all English people like ancient Greece. There's it's a turnoff or something. So I've stopped saying that. But I also have heard from a lot of people that Ill-Made Knight, which I offer as a starter book, is too violent.
You can't win.
And,
you can't win.
Yeah, so let's try Artifact Space as an intro. And then if you like that, I would suggest maybe Red Knight or Cold Iron.
Yeah, not as violent. It's also got a female-centered character as well, which is excellent. Also sci-fi, so that's your first kind of book in there. But like you say, it's like your staple style with the characters, everyone getting to know each other as well, and it feels like the story of someone's life.
Yeah, it's some of the strongest characters of any book I've ever read.
Yeah, and not too many sword fights.
Not too many swords, exactly.
You can never have too many.
No, that's true. Definitely not.
But I think there we go. I think some of the other questions we'd already kind of naturally answered about advice for writing. And I think, is that?
We have reached our conclusion. But thank you so much, Christian, for coming on. I know that is your vacation. We do really appreciate you giving us the time to chat with you.
Yeah, always a pleasure. And thank you so much for having me on. And hopefully we will get to meet in person this year.
Absolutely, we'd love to. But excellent, stay safe and enjoy your writing, enjoy your vacation, of course.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you again to the Broken Binding, to Matt, for hosting this. In a sense, we'll put the Broken Binding down, a link as well to Christian Cameron's works. Go buy Artifact Space and the Hawkwood Sword, which came out this month, and everything else that Christian Cameron has written. Go do it.
43 books.
Every single one. I was
going to say how many?
Yeah.
43.
Just do it all. You won't regret it. So thank you again. Thank you, Christian. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we've both definitely learnt a lot. Yeah, and it's been really interesting having insights into your work.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for watching. We hope to see you again very soon.
So, truth and courage.
Truth and courage.
The brothers Gwynne.
Truth and courage.